Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and Tebow.
Boy, would the tenor of today's show be different if they lost that game. Cardinals coming off of a win against the Texas Rangers. We're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, and we appreciate you being a part of the show here on the Redbird Report. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. We do this every week throughout the course of the Cardinals season. Cardinals lose 2 out of 3 against Texas Rangers, and mostly the Cardinals offense has not been very good for about 3 weeks now?
Yeah.
They are getting reinforcements. Lars Nootbaar making his way back to the major leagues. He is expected to return to the lineup on Friday night against the Cincinnati Reds as the Cardinals continue this extended homestand against the Cincinnati Reds. T-Bone, there's a lot to get into here. There are roster changes that are going to be necessary because of this move. With him getting the call up, somebody's got to go down. There are discussions about what position he's ultimately going to play. I think some would like to see him in center field. I don't know how likely that is, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. Also, where does he bat? I think most assume, all right, well, the top 4 is really good. 5 has been a disaster for most of the season. You just slot Lars Nootbaar into that spot. I think both of us have some questions about whether or not that's the right place to put him right now. So let's start here. How important is it that they're getting Lars Nootbaar back? What does this do for the St. Louis Cardinals in the immediate future?
I think it's a huge deal that they're getting Lars Nootbaar back. And I think the reason for it is because they desperately need somebody to help lengthen out this lineup. And when you look at their lineup 5 through 9 going into that series against the Texas Rangers, it was last in baseball in production and OPS. Okay, well, Nootbaar's going to help that out if he's able to bounce back and be the guy more of what I think he's going to be, which is from years prior to having this surgery, 2022, 24% above league average, then 14, then 13%, and then last year the injuries caught up to him and he was 4% below league average. I'm going to chalk that up to the injuries, the fact that he had both of his heels operated on, and say, okay, in theory, you should be getting a guy that's about 15% above league average in this lineup, and that's a huge deal. You know, I bring this up. People seem to think that I'm acting like he's the savior for this lineup. He's not the savior for the lineup. He's not going to come in here and suddenly they're going to go on like a 25-5 run. But he's just going to help lengthen it out right now. Because right now it is so top heavy. And when one guy in the top 4 doesn't hit, you feel it, right? Walker just got done going through one of his another mini slumps. And it felt like the world was falling apart on the St. Louis Cardinals. Wetherholt didn't really hit for the month of May, and you could really feel it. So I think it's a huge deal that they're getting Lars Nootbaar back and adding someone that could potentially be 15% above league average in the top 5 of this lineup. And it's why I feel pretty good about where they're at today, because they are getting a reinforcement back like Lars Nootbaar, and I know we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but the fact that they're going to get Church and Urias back, that will help them out as well through the lineup. I feel really good as where they are at as Nootbaar is returning.
Cardinals fans like J.J. Wetherholt, right? I think he's done a pretty good job for this lineup.
I think he's become a fan favorite.
And I'm like, take away the defense, take away the base running, everything else. Now, all of that stuff has been great. You shouldn't take that away, but that's part of the value. Just as a hitter, he's been awesome. He's been better than I expected him to be. More pop than I thought. Immediately it's translated to the big league level in a way that I wasn't prepared for. He looks like a veteran. The reason that I bring this up is because if I flat out told you, hey, you can add another J.J. Wetherholt offensively to the lineup, just what the bat has done so far this year, all of us would sign up in a heartbeat. That's what Lars Nootbaar has been for his career. J.J. Wetherholt this season is batting .249. In Lars Nootbaar's career, he's a .242 hitter. J.J. Wetherholt this season is getting on base at a .355 clip. Lars Nootbaar for his career gets on base at a .345 clip. J.J. Wetherholt this season slugging .400, and Lars Nootbaar for his career slugs .405. They're near mirror images of one another. They are both guys that are high on base, lower in terms of the average, and a little bit of pop to add to it. And they both bat from the left side, and they both grind at bats. They're going to make those pitchers increase the pitch count as they continue along. They're a nightmare to go up against. So if you can not just have one of those guys, but 2 of them, that sounds like a pretty good thing to me, especially when what you're replacing is a bunch of dudes at the bottom of the order that have done mostly nothing so far this season. So I'm with you, T-Bone. This is not adding another Jordan Walker. It's not adding another Alec Burleson. It's not adding another Ivan Herrera. But it's the next best thing by adding basically another J.J. Wetherholt. And I think all of us would have signed up for that whenever we heard, hey, Lars Nootbaar is expected to make his return.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The guy that's hit 5 for most of the year in this lineup has been Nolan Gorman. Mm-hmm. Gorman's been that guy. Well, Gorman is at 79 for his OPS plus. So he's been 21% below league average. Now, I know he's not being pulled out of the lineup in this case. It's not a complete one-for-one replacement. But you're telling me I'm going from a guy that's 21% below league average in that 5 spot to a guy that I hope could be 15% above league average, or depending on how you do the order, somebody that's above league average. That's a huge deal for the St. Louis Cardinals, because that 5 spot is the moment where, like, you feel it in the game, right? I mean, watching these games, they go up and you go, wow, Wetherholt, that's fun. Herrera, wow. Burley, wow. Walker, whoa. And then you go, oh, okay, now we're at that part of the order.
That's the bathroom break. Yeah. you have the 5 through 9 coming up.
All right, you need a beer? Let's go. Okay.
That's right. That's when you go over. If it's a Friday night, you go up to the Crown Bar, you get your $5 Busch Light pour, you go back down to the bottom. But when the top 4 is coming up, you make sure you're in your seats to see what they're about to do. So there's got to be a corresponding move, right? You can't just call a guy up. You then have to send somebody else down. This is the unfortunate part of the reality of playing Major League Baseball. There's always somebody that's coming for your job. Hard to get there, even harder to stay in the big leagues. So I think there's a few options that maybe make the most sense. I asked this on my Twitter account at BK Sports Talk. Which player will be sent down tomorrow when the Cardinals call up Lars Nootbaar? Not who do you think should be, not who do you want to be the guy that goes down. Who do you think will be sent down when Noot returns? The most common answer was Brian Torres with 44% of the vote. Next up was Victor Scott at 28%. I don't think those people got the assignment. At 22%, Thomas Sajaci, and then at 5%, somebody else that I did not mention there. T-Bone, for you, let's start out with who do you think will be sent down for Lars Nootbaar? Who do you think that's going to be?
I think it's going to be Sajaci. I understand the Torres one for people that vote on it because you're replacing one left-handed bat for another. So you just kind of make that transaction. But the reason I don't think they're going to do Torres yet is because they seem to like his bat. They seem to, every time you ask them about Torres, the answer you get is he's going to get opportunities. And if you think about it, they're probably going to have to slow play Lars Nootbaar. We've talked about this on the show. He's not going to come in and play 6 out of 6 in a 7-day week, right? He's probably playing 4 out of 6 would be my guess. He's probably guaranteed an off day throughout a series in the early portions of his return. And if that's the case, when you pull him out of the lineup, I kind of want Brian Torres to go out there in left field. And the hope is it's a little different, but it's kind of replacing 1 for 1, right? You replace Nootbaar, who's more of the on base, doesn't hit for as high an average, for a guy that hits for the higher average, but hopefully carries the same on base. So I think they're going to keep Torres. Though it sucks for Sajaci because it's about that time when he's gotten hot. He's actually looking better at the plate here of late. I just don't know that you need his role on this roster. And the reason I say that is you're probably about a week away from Urias coming back. It's like your backup shortstop, if you need him in a pinch, could be Fermin for right now, or Wetherholt if you wanted to. I know they kind of made reference to that when I was at the ballpark last weekend. So you don't really need Sajaci for that role. Second base could be Fermin in the backup. Third base could be Fermin in a backup role. Fermin can play center field as well, and I think they might trust him a little bit more than Torres. So you don't really have a spot for Sajaci in this scenario. So I think he's the guy that ultimately ends up getting sent down by the Cardinals.
That would be my guess as well, and I think it's twofold. One, because of all of the reasons that you just mentioned on the Major League roster, and also because Sajaci has shown some signs of life lately. He hit the triple the other night, had the homer over the weekend. The bat appears to be coming around. Maybe he's starting to get some of his timing back. Well, what's the spot that he's going to be playing over the next few weeks? The answer is there's not one. He does not have a role once Lars Nootbaar returns, because I agree with you. I think most of the time against left-handed pitching, you're going to see Jose Fermin get those opportunities to spell Lars Nootbaar. And against right-handed pitching, you will very likely see Brian Torres in that role. He doesn't really have a backup spot anywhere. He's behind Fermin as a pinch hitter. He's behind Velazquez as a pinch hitter right now. I don't know where he gets his opportunities. And with this bat starting to come around, well, then go back down to AAA and play every day. You can play all over the diamond, but I would like to see him primarily get opportunities at third base. Because right now, that's the spot that the Cardinals have maybe the weakest bat at with Nolan Gorman. And I think that's where his opportunities could potentially come later on this season if he's able to continue with the production that we've seen lately. So it's not only about the major league roster, that's the priority, but it's also about Thomas Saggese and his career as a 24-year-old. I don't want his bat going stale at the back end of my bench, which was the reason that they originally had sent him down, 3 weeks ago now? Yeah. And then he was called right back up the next day because of the Ramon Urias injury, I believe. So yeah, I think he's the one that ultimately goes down. I'm not sure that that's the decision that a lot of Cardinals fans would like to see. But for me, I think it's both what they will do and also what they should do. I think it's the roster move that makes the most sense.
And I think because I do think there is a scenario where they may send Torres down because they'll be too afraid of this losing a backup shortstop, which I think is just a weird way to handle the roster management. Because you and I have had this conversation in the past, if that's what they elect to do, is, well, we got to have a backup shortstop if Wynn goes down. Well, I'm assuming you guys aren't planning for an off day for him. I'm assuming the hope is Urias is back within a week or two. Can you not live with Fermin in a pinch if you had to do it because when, knock on wood, doesn't happen, had to leave a game for an injury? There's no spot for Saggese. I mean, they haven't used him at shortstop yet, if I'm not mistaken, right? I don't think he's backed up Wynn, but
he might have had one game, I think. But yeah, it's not been a consistent thing. And if Wynn were to go down, you're only worried about that one day. The next day, Saggese gets called back up.
Exactly.
You're not under any kind of a limitation because in the event of an injury, you can call him back up, even if, and God forbid, fingers crossed this doesn't happen, knock on wood, but if Wynn were to go down this weekend with an injury, well, then you can just call Saggese back up. It's not something where you're precluded from doing so because the injury took place. You could get away from the typical 10 days that you have to keep him down.
But that's the only way that I see Saggese's not the one that goes down, is they overthink it and they think that they have to have a backup shortstop, and they view Saggese as that for the right now. That's the only path I see for him. I think they're going to ultimately send him down, but I do think it's going to be a longer conversation than we're expecting because I think they're going to be weighing that consideration for Thomas Saggese because that's what they did when Urias went down, right? They said it was more valuable to not give Saggese at-bats, essentially, and serve as a backup shortstop than it was for him to go down and play every single day.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what they decide to do there. So that's the roster manipulation. Now for the lineup, because Lars is going to play when he's healthy most days. Probably not, I agree with you, every day. I think like early on, I would assume you probably will not see him in a day game after a night game early on in this. And it works out actually really well in this series. The way that things are currently set up, at least according to the ESPN.com schedule, they're expected to play a day game on Saturday after a night game on Friday night. And there's expected to be a lefty on the mound for the Reds on Saturday. So this is a scenario where like Friday night you start Lars, you get him a day off on Saturday, and then he comes back for the day game on Sunday. And then you've got a built-in off day on Monday. And then it would be next Thursday before he gets another day off. And it would be the third game of that Mets series. So I think over the next 6, you're talking about 4 out of 6 for him. And that makes sense. I think that's totally fair. And you could have Fermin start in the outfield on those games where you're going up against a lefty. In the lineup, when you start to construct this thing, the way they have typically been going is, especially against righties, Wetherholt, Herrera, Burleson, Walker as their top 4. And then that 5 spot has either been Gorman or Torres because they like that lefty in front of Mason Wynn. I think for most people, that's where they've been slotting in Lars Nootbaar. Just, hey, he bats 5th. That's the spot that they've been weak. That's where Lars Nootbaar goes whenever he returns. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you think that's where they should be batting him early on?
I don't. I think they should hit him 3rd. And my thought process behind it is when I'm thinking about Lars Nootbaar and his profile as a player, it is more of he's an on-base guy than he is an contact hitting guy. And what I mean by that is he carries a high on base. You made reference to it. His career on base percentage is .341. That's really freaking good. But he only hits .242 as a hitter in his career for average. So if his best tool is getting on base, you don't really need that in that 5 spot for Lars Nootbaar, because then we're having a conversation of, This is great. Nootbaar came up, maybe let's say with a runner at second, and he drew a walk. That does nothing for the Cardinals because guess what? Now we're back to having the conversation about the bottom of the order, which 6 through 9 is still going to be bad for at least another week or two. I think the reason that you would want to hit him third is you just load up with high on base guys at the top of this order 1 through 3. So I would go Wetherholt, keep him at the 1 spot because he's been so good at getting on base. 357 is his on base. I agree with you keeping Herrera in the 2 spot, another guy that gets on base at a 382 clip and has a little bit of pop in there as well. He could drive in Wetherholt if he's on second base. Then you go to Nootbaar, who has a little bit of pop, maybe comes through and drives the ball a little bit. But again, another high on base guy. So I'm going with 3 guys right there that have potentially above 340 on base percentages. And then it falls into where the thump comes in the lineup, where you then got Walker, who can clean things up with his power, who also is hitting for a high average. And then Burley, to me, profiles more as a 5-hole hitter, to where, yes, he gets on base, but he does it with contact, to where a single from Burley with a runner on second base could bring home a run. Meanwhile, Nootbaar, not saying he's less likely to single because he's a 240 hitter compared to Burley, who's been a almost 290 hitter the last 2 years. That walk there from Nootbaar would do you no good. It's about having that contact hitter there in the 5 spot in Burleson. I think that's what they should do against right-handed pitching. Wetherholt, Herrera, followed by Nootbaar, Walker, Burleson. That's what I would do against righties. Lefties, it's a lot tougher, but against righties, that's what I would do.
I was of the opinion that the common belief is what they should do. Yeah, you put Lars Nootbaar into the 5-hole. He just replaces Gorman/Torres. That was my opinion as well. And frankly, I hadn't given any consideration to the 3 spot. And then you sold me on it, and I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I'm upset about is that I didn't think of it first. But beyond that, I think it's exactly where they should put him. I'm looking at the runners in scoring position numbers, right? So this is for their career. It's not just the small sample size, which has been excellent so far this season from Alec Burleson. It's what he's done his entire career. They have almost the exact same OPS with runners in scoring position do Alec Burleson and Lars Nootbaar. They're both at a 730. It's 731 for Noot. It's 729 for Alec Burleson, which again, it's so marginal that it's basically the same. But the way they get there is extremely different. Lars Nootbaar hits 245 in those spots and gets on base 34% of the time. Alec Burleson hits 280 and gets on base 32% of the time, and does so with more pop, a 405 slug for Burley, a 380 slug for Lars Nootbaar. That on-base percentage that you're talking about, that 350 on base whenever he gets into a runners in scoring position situation, it's not meaningless. It does matter to a degree, but it's not as valuable as if that runner is on second base, me being able to hit a single. The hard hit single from Alec Burleson probably scores that run from second. The walk from Lars Nootbaar does not. Now I've got to rely on whoever's hitting 6th, 7th, and 8th to be able to drive not only the runner that's already in scoring position in, but also Lars Nootbaar in. So what's more valuable? Getting Lars Nootbaar on as the 5-hole after the top of the order has already been able to get on, or for Alec Burleson to drive in Nootbaar after Nootbaar has been able to get on to the base paths. My belief is it's the latter. I would go with you. I don't know if they'll want to do that early on. It might be a scenario where they say, hey, get your sea legs out there. We're not going to give you as many at-bats as Alec Burleson in the first week or two because Burley has been so good, and we're not going to drop him in the order when he's been one of our best hitters this year. I get that. There is some validity to the argument of like the mental side of things where Burley he's been a 3-hole hitter for most of the season, and he's been really good. That being said, there have been games where he's been batting 5, like the other night against a lefty, and he did really well there too. I don't think he's some mental midget. I think he'd be fine. So I would be in favor of making the move immediately. Just saying, hey, this is our best order 1 through 5. Burley, you're a team player. You know all year this has been what we've done. We're death by 1,000 cuts. Sequencing matters for the 2026 Cardinals. This is our best way to sequence things.
And I think that what you said there is sequencing matters for the Cardinals and their death by 1,000 cuts. A lot of people will hear this and say, well, that's not how you should build a lineup. You should be getting your 4 best hitters or your 3 best hitters, the most at-bats, 1 through 3. They're not built to be doing that. This lineup is not like the Dodgers or the Phillies. You have to kind of do things a little bit differently, right? I mean, this is the same organization, and at the time it was the right call that had Wynn as a cleanup hitter to start the season. It didn't work. Luckily, Jordan Walker was able to become an MVP candidate, and they were able to make that switch. But that was the kind of thing that we were talking about, and it's not because this is who your three best hitters are. It is because this team has to do things differently, right? They have to zag while everybody else is zigging. So it's going to have to be different, in my opinion. Ideally, Burley's a better hitter than Nootbaar. He would be 3. But there's nobody behind Nootbaar to help support you 6 through 9 right now. So I would put him in there right away. I'm with you. I don't think Burley would be a guy that would be like, I have to be in the 3 spot. How could I not hit? He hits 5th against lefties. And he profiles better, right? I mean, the way I would tell this if I were having the meeting with Alec Burleson, I'd go, dude, there's going to be 3 guys ahead of you and Jordan Walker with like a 340 on base percentage. You should be drooling at the RBI opportunities that you're going to have now.
And he's been unbelievable with runners in scoring position this season. He's batting like 300 when they get runners in scoring position with him coming up to the plate. He's been as clutch as anybody in the sport. So the idea that now I'm going to have another guy in front of him that gets on base at the same clip as what J.J. Wetherholt has so far this year, I'd have to look up the numbers. I bet you J.J. Wetherholt has scored, what do you think? He's scored on the season 40 runs. I bet you 20 of those at a minimum are from RBI opportunities by Alec Burleson. Burley on the year is already up to 42 RBIs in 59 games. We're a little more than a third of the way through the season, and he's at 42 RBIs. He's going to get even more of those if you're able to put Lars Nootbaar in front of him. So I'm in agreement with you. You swayed me. You have pushed me on the side of Lars Nootbaar should be your 3-hole hitter. I'm not going to bitch and moan about him being the 5-hole hitter if that's the direction they go, but I would prefer the 3 slot for Lars Nootbaar. The next thing that we need to get to here is the Nolan Gorman situation, because I think this will have fixed their 1 to 5. 6 right now is Mason Wynn, and listen, it ain't great, but I think he's fine. I think he'll be all right long term. You also have, against right-handed pitchers on certain days, the opportunity to have Jimmy Crooks in the lineup, which, if that's your 8-hole hitter, he looks pretty good so far. I've been impressed by what we've seen from him lately, and I very much was not a year ago when we saw Jimmy Crooks. So again, that lengthens your lineup a little bit too. And then there's the Gorman thing. And he's just been bad. There's no getting around it, man. He's been one of the least productive left-handed hitters in Major League Baseball for 3 consecutive seasons now. I looked up the numbers. If you're just looking at wins above replacement, strikeout rate, batting average, OPS plus, all of those different things, legitimately a bottom 5 lefty in baseball for 3 years running now. So they're eventually going to have to turn their attention to something else. Are you already there? Is there anybody else that you could turn your attention to, or is it still Nolan Gorman's job at third base and they just kind of have to bide their time until somebody else emerges?
I think it's Gorman's job until somebody else emerges. I think when Urias comes back, I think you go back to the platoon because Urias is great against left-handed pitching, as we saw early on in the year. So, I think when that happens, you'll really start to see them platoon this. But right now, I think it's Gorman's job. I mean, I think we always say, read the Cardinals' actions, not their words, right? It speaks louder. And their actions with Blaze Jordan were very telling the moment they called up Jimmy Crooks. He's now mostly playing first base and DH. He hasn't been at third base for, I think it's the last 5 games, if I'm not mistaken. So that tells me they don't think he's a third baseman. And that was my sense on it prior to when they pulled him away from third base. But everybody thought, hey, you might as well try the hot bat. We still know the Cardinals value defense. And I don't think they want to turn to Blaze Jordan at third base. I think they view Blaze Jordan as the guy to potentially replace Velasquez later on. So if I take out Blaze as he's not an option, I'm not convinced that JC will eventually take that spot from him. We'll see, depending on what happens if they send him down and he gets to hit. I don't see an internal replacement for Nolan Gorman right now. So I think it's still his job. You can platoon it when Urias comes back. But to me, their franchise third baseman is not within the organization. They do not have an answer for this position for the now and for the long term.
Can I present an alternative for you?
Sure.
I don't think this is likely. I want to say that on the front end. I'm just if we're spitballing here and you're looking for better production and you want to do things a little differently and you're looking for an answer internally.
Hope it's not what I'm thinking you're going to say.
What if you kick Wetherholt over to third base? I know he's been excellent defensively at second, so it's probably a non-starter. But what if you do that, and then you put Brian Torres at second base? You say, hey, our lineup against righties is Torres at second, Wetherholt at third, and Lars Nootbaar in left. And then we've got like either Crooks and Herrera as your DH/catching options. And that's the way that we're going to go about it here for a little bit. Now, center field ain't great. It's also Victor Scott until you get Nathan Church back, and then Nathan Church becomes your 9-hole hitter in this scenario as another lefty going up against the right-handed pitchers. But the premise here is you decide to go, because Torres has basically not played third base at all as a professional in the last few seasons, but he's played a lot of second. Could you consider a scenario where Torres is at second and Wetherholt bumps over to third?
I would consider it. I guess it just depends on how they feel he's graded out at second base in his time at the minor leagues, because like I haven't been all that impressed with his defense out in left field. Now, on the dirt could be totally different. I acknowledge that. The reason I would prefer not to do it is because I feel like this is the Donovan conversation that they had last year, where they said Donovan's the utility guy. They bounced him around. Then they finally said, why the hell are we moving this guy? This guy's so good at second base. I already feel that way about JJ Wetherholt. I think that guy's a Gold Glove second baseman, and I don't know that I want to move him off of the position. Would I be willing to try it if you get super desperate to where like Gorman's not figuring it out? Let's say he sends the JC down to the minors. He's not hitting at third base. Blaze Jordan's not a third baseman, and we're getting into July and you're still kind of in the playoff race. Then I might listen to it and consider it. If I can avoid it, I would not move JJ Wetherholt. I think he's a Gold Glove second baseman for the long term. I would rather just try and figure out what we're going to do at third base by looking external once we get to the offseason. And if we can't find it out this offseason, I'll look for it again in the next offseason.
Full disclosure, I agree with you. Like, I think that's his position. I think that's where he should be long term. The reason I bring it up is because I don't see an alternative. I don't think there is a viable alternative at the major league level against right-handed pitching to Nolan Gorman. He's fine defensively. It ain't great, but it's fine. It's been better this season over there. And like Urias, for all of his good that he brings, A, defensively, and B, against lefties, he's horrible, like unplayable against right-handed pitching so far this year. It hasn't been good against right-handed pitchers so far this year at times for Jose Fermin. I don't think they trust him necessarily as an everyday defensive guy on the infield either. It's like, I don't think they have an alternative. So eventually you look at, all right, what can we do? How do we upgrade this lineup? What is our best case scenario here to be able, because they've got an alternative in left now with Lars Nootbaar. They will eventually have an alternative in center when Nathan Church returns. They have all of their spots on the diamond pretty well accounted for at that point. The one that they would still in this scenario where he's not hitting it, feel like they are they've got a liability there, is Nolan Gorman at third base. And JJ Wetherholt has spent a decent amount of time at third base in his career. I know he prefers second, I think, but that's the one way you could potentially get your way out of this, is by putting those guys at second. And then you could go through Fermin there, you could do Torres there, you could go with, you could try to JC there. There's Ramon Mendoza down at the AAA level. I don't think he's going to be an option for you, but whatever, like you could try it, I suppose. There's a lot of guys you could run through as that second base option, but none of them really profile as great third base options for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I would say I would probably try Urias first before I went there.
Against righties?
Even against righties, because like I'm looking at his career numbers. Yes, he's been bad this year against righties. You're not wrong. His OPS plus against righties is at a 10. Whew.
It's so bad.
That's bad. But in his career, he's only 1% below league average against righties. And it really didn't start to fall off until last year when he was down 22% below league average. So maybe it's just a one-off from last year and just a weird start for him against righties. And it's 41 at-bats is a decent amount so far, so maybe it is something that's going to be a problem for him. I would still rather try that first before I get to the conversation of Wetherholt. But I get what you're saying, because you're right. They don't have anybody internally that's going to profile as a third baseman for them, both in the short term and in the long term. I don't see anybody in the organization that seems to be that guy right now. The problem, though, then, I think when you do this with Wetherholt is, okay, well, then who's the long-term answer at second?
I think that's easier, though. I think it's easier to find a future second baseman than it is to find the future third baseman. I think those guys are kind of dime a dozen Like, you can find a lot of different options that can play at that spot. It's easier. It's a less premium position defensively, and it's easier to profile offensively as a second baseman than it is as a corner infielder. So that would be the other kind of pitch that I would give is I can find another second baseman. They may not be as good as JJ Wetherholt. They probably won't be. But Wetherholt, if he can play at third as well as he's played at second, it is a more premium position. So it might even add more value to JJ Wetherholt long term.
Yeah, that's fair. And the thing I'd be curious about with Wetherholt, and I don't know what to make of this, to be clear, because it's hard to have a good arm value, in my opinion, according to Baseball Savant, but his arm does not grade out well. Now, he's at second base. I have no idea what to make of that. Yeah. I assume that's a nothing burger, but I wonder if that is part of the thought process, too, is, hey, we don't know that we want to put him at third because we're not sure how well his arm will play up. And also, by putting him at second base, now, it didn't end up being a problem last year. Let's not forget why he dropped in the draft as well. It was his health as a shortstop at West Virginia dealing with those hamstring issues. Now, maybe that's not anything to worry about long term. They've not signaled any of that, but I would think it's easier for him to stay healthy at second base than it is to be at short or at third.
And all of this is, he's doing really well. He's hitting leadoff. He's playing second every day. And like that's your role. So some of this might just be very simply, no, we're not switching his position midseason, dummy. He's doing well. Like he's grading out as the best defender at second base. He's hitting really well. Why would we try to make this harder for a player that has adjusted better than any of us could have possibly expected? Which, again, I understand all of that. Just trying to present some alternatives to get more production out of that position. It's tough. And this is why you continue to see Nolan Gorman getting those opportunities, at least until Ramon Urias gets back to the major league level. I can hear a lot of you already doing it. You're probably shouting at either your radio, your phone, your screen on your TV, however you're either listening or watching to us right now. You're saying to yourself, Blaze Jordan should be the third baseman. Why aren't you guys bringing him up? We'll talk about him and the other AAA prospect who's crushing the baseball right now, Joshua Baez, next here on the Redbird Report. So the big conversation that a lot of Cardinals fans are having right now is, okay, so when are they going to call up Joshua Baez or Blaze Jordan? Both conversations are understandable. They're crushing the baseball down at AAA. Joshua Baez, I think, has 17 home runs now at AAA this season. Blaze Jordan is hitting above 300 and has done everything you could ask for from an offensive standpoint. Now, both of them have limitations, not necessarily in their game so much as how they get to the major league level. There are players blocking them. Blaze Jordan, if you listen to the Cardinals' actions, is a first base DH option. No, not a third baseman. Over the last week, since calling up Jimmy Crooks, and the Memphis Redbirds have had a little bit more flexibility with their lineup, with the DH spot opening up more often now, they have gone with Blaze Jordan as the first base and DH option in every game that he's been eligible for. He has not played a single game at third base since Crooks came up. That's meaningful to me. That tells me they do not think that he's going to be that long term. If they thought he could be a viable third baseman, and with the way that we've seen Nolan Gorman playing recently, dude, they'd be playing him every day at third base to find out, all right, what are we missing here? Is there anything that he could do? Like, is he for sure going to be able to do this at the major league level? They'd be testing it out right now. They're not. So that's part of it. And you've got a DH right now, 100 different options. And at first base, Alec Burleson. So there's very limited opportunities currently for Blaze Jordan. And for Joshua Baez, I know he's playing center field right now down at AAA, but he seems to profile best in left field. And even in center, Nathan Church is making his way back up to the major leagues sooner rather than later by heading out on his rehab assignment this weekend. So he's probably blocked by Nathan Church over the next few weeks as well. Who do you think is closer, though? Who's closer to a major league call-up in your estimation, T-Bone? Joshua Baez or Blaze Jordan?
I actually lean it's Blaze Jordan. And the reason that I would say that is because I think it's easier to find his path onto the major league roster. And I think it's Nelson Velasquez's spot. Now, you might be saying, well, Velasquez is an outfielder, Blaze Jordan's not. If we're being honest, Velasquez is a DH that hits right-handed that sometimes stands out in left field. I think what you could see from the Cardinals is they're trying this. They're trying to strike while the iron is hot with Nelson Velasquez. I think that we've been critical of them not doing in years past, which is the right call. And they'll give him some runway against lefties. And you know what? The moment he goes cold and he doesn't start hitting and it's striking out at like a 30+% clip, they'll say, thanks, we're going to try something else if Blaze Jordan is continuing to hit. And then you can bring him up to the major league level. He can DH against lefties, might be able to get a couple starts at first base if you want to give Burley some time off because he's not been very good against lefties, so you could play him there. I think that's the quicker path, and that's why I would say Blaze Jordan. For Baez, I don't think they really view him as a center fielder. I think there's two reasons why he is out there. One is they've got a ton of outfielders on the AAA roster. Somebody's got to do it, and he probably profiles the best to try it out for now. And two, there's no harm in finding out if he can play center field for a guy that's a top-level prospect, top 100 in baseball, top 50 depending on some lists you look at. And if they're being honest, they can look at their center field spot and go, Scott may not be the answer like we were expecting. Not sure on Nathan Church. There's a higher ceiling to Joshua Baez here in center field. And if he can play center and provide this kind of power, he brings more value than he would if he's a corner outfielder that does this. So I think that's the reasons they're trying it. But based on everything that I've heard doesn't seem like he is a center fielder. Probably profiles better in a corner. And seeing him in person, only one game, but seeing him in person didn't look like a center fielder in my opinion. It looks like he would move a little bit better for a guy that's in a corner. So if you're going off of that, it's just hard to find his path here. And if they're in it at the deadline, I'm not convinced they're trading Lars Nootbaar. So then it really becomes a conversation of how does he get here?
We're in agreement. It's Blaze Jordan. And I find the Joshua Baez conversation to be really interesting. Like, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be a long-term center fielder, but you let him try it until it officially is not going to happen, right? Like the old baseball adage is you don't move guys off of catcher, shortstop, and center field until you have to.
Yeah.
Like if a guy can prove to be a shortstop long-term, well, that's the most valuable thing because so few players can actually do it. And then if they can't, well, then you move them to either third or second. If neither of those works, then eventually they get to the first base DH type, right? That's the least valuable of all of the positions, which brings us back to Blaze Jordan. He's a first base DH type, but he can mash. And if you can mash against left-handed pitching at the major league level, they will find a spot for you. That's why Nelson Velasquez is here right now. I am a Royals fan. I've seen the Nelson Velasquez experience. It went really well for about 40 games, and then it went really poorly every game thereafter. Struck out like 35% of the time, had a terrible batting average, just did not add a whole lot of anything offensively. So, dude, squeeze this lemon for all it's worth. Make as much lemonade as you can out of it. But eventually, it's probably going to go dry. And whenever it does, if and when that happens, well, you've got another viable option right behind him. And that is when you turn your attention to Blaze Jordan, so long as he is still hitting, or maybe it's Thomas Ajayci at that point. Maybe it's somebody else that has stepped up at the minor league level. Whoever it ends up being is fine, not really worried about the name, but that's when you go to the other alternative whenever it is that you have extracted everything that there is for Nelson Velasquez. Meanwhile, with Joshua Baez, like you're talking about Lars Nootbaar, you're talking about the return of Nathan Church. I just don't see, barring injury or a trade, a way that he ends up here at the major league level prior to August. I think that's what you're talking about, is probably like post-trade deadline is the earliest that you could see Baez, and that's in a scenario where they would potentially trade away Lars Nootbaar, and he replaces Noot in left field as your everyday starter.
And we've been hinting at this by saying he comes up and plays against lefties. When you call up Joshua Baez, that guy plays every day. He's the kind of prospect that you don't call up and have him sit on the pine and just kind of pick out your favorite matchups for him. He's here in the lineup 5 of 6 in a week at minimum. Probably a 6 of 6 guy. When you call up Blaze Jordan, and this is no shot towards Blaze, the Cardinals would say this, and I think this is a thing that we've had issues with him in the past. You're not calling him up here to be an everyday guy. You're calling him up here to do what Velasquez is doing. We need you for a specific role, and we're going to see if you can do it. And if you can't, you're going right back down to the minors. But you may have to sit on the pine for 3 of 6 games. It may be you only get 1 start in a week, but you got to be ready to come up here and hit lefties. And that's why it's a little easier to see the path for Blaze Jordan. Those guys you can circle through on the bench. As we've seen, they've kind of been going through the roster turn a little bit. For a guy like Baez, you're not calling him up here unless there becomes a clear spot to how he's going to be playing every single day.
Yeah, so not everybody's an everyday player, right? Like you need Jose Fermin. You need a Thomas Ajayci. You need these guys that, especially as they still have the ability to go up and down with that Memphis shuttle, it's really nice to have that, man. Like Ramon Urias, he's carved out a hell of a major league career for himself. That guy's not a starter, not an everyday player. He's going to play like 70, 60 games a year get him to 250-ish plate appearances per year, and make a few $1,000,000 a year. That's a good living if you can get it. That may be Blaze Jordan's career. From the other side of the plate, that's what Jock Peterson has become. He's a platoon guy. He's going to be a DH for a team that when you go against right-handed pitching, he starts for you. He's batting leadoff right now for the Texas Rangers because of how great he is against lefties. Against righties. And then the moment that a left-handed pitcher comes into the game, you replace him with somebody else because that's where things go bad. So for Blaze Jordan, I don't know if he's going to be a splitty, but it very well may be he's able to make a career for himself by just being current part of his career, Paul Goldschmidt, or very late career, Albert Pujols. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that's the way that your career ultimately goes. All right, coming up on the other side, have any of the Cardinals starters tangibly changed the way you view them and their futures here in St. Louis? Pallante's pitching really well. He's the one that really brought this to the conversation. But also, boy, has Dustin May been good since those first couple of starts. We'll get into their outlook next here on the Redbird Report. The Cardinals starters are pitching very well right now. You look at it. Over the last 30 days, Kyle Leahy, I don't think I even realized this, has a 3.1 ERA. Michael McGreevy has a 3.6, Dustin May has a 3.9, Libby a 4.1, and Andre Pallante with a 4.2. Every bit as importantly, 3 of the 5 have a strikeout rate of at least 8.5 batters per 9 innings. So 3 of your 5 starters right now, one of the worst strikeouts rotations in Major League Baseball for most of this season, have been roughly a strikeout per inning or better over the last 30 days. I didn't think we'd be saying that at any point this season. So T-Bone, my question to you, how many of these guys, if any, have tangibly changed the way that you view their futures here in St. Louis? Because I'll start with one for me. I love what we're seeing from Andre Pallante right now. He looks like the best version of Andre Pallante that we've seen in 2 years, maybe even better than what he was a couple of years ago. And I think it might be more sustainable than what he was previously. However, I don't think it's really changed my outlook for him at all because of where he's at contractually. He's already making $4 million this year. Through the arbitration process, that means he's probably going to be around $7-ish million next year. So I don't think his future is necessarily here long term. I think you appreciate everything he's doing. He has changed my outlook for him this year. I think he's just better than what I expected him to be. But long term, I don't see a way that he can really work his way into their future plans, which I guess sucks, but he's going to still make money from somebody across Major League Baseball. Is there anybody that has, though, for you, changed your outlook for them?
I think the only guy for me that I would say is in this conversation, and I would lead by saying I'm not even 100% in on this yet, would be Dustin May. May would be the only guy for me that I could look at and say, all right, I can hear the argument on how you could get to the spot where this guy's changed his long-term outlook. Because McGreevy's been everything I expected him to be, right? I knew he's going to potentially have a low ERA because he's just such a good artist when it comes to just working around the edges of the zone. But I know what he is. He's a pitch-to-contact guy. Is he a guy that I'm going to go through the arbitration process with completely? I'm a maybe on that one. Same with Pallante. I agree with everything that you said about Pallante. Leahy hasn't changed much for me in terms of how I view him in the long term. Now, the Cardinals would probably disagree on that with me on that one, but I think May's the only guy. Libby, by the way, too, is another guy. I feel kind of the same with Libby. Libby's kind of a hit or miss number 3 that sometimes looks really good, and sometimes you go, boy, we need an upgrade. May's the only one for me to where this recent stretch from him, if you take away his first 2 starts of the season, we're not even talking about a guy with a 4 ERA. We're probably talking about a guy at like a 3.3. That's how good he has been for the Cardinals since he got roughed up in his first 2 starts. And he's got decent swing and miss stuff at times. He pitches like a number 2, 3, somewhere in that range. He looks like pre-injury Dodger version of Dustin May. And that's a guy that you have to consider potentially keeping around long term. Now, I don't know that I'm completely in yet on giving him a long-term contract, but I'm definitely in a spot to where if there's not real value for him at the deadline or you're in this thing at the deadline, he's going to have the birds on the bat across his chest. And then we're going to pick up his mutual option. And then if he declines it, congrats, you just got hit with a qualifying offer. So I think he's the only one for me that has really changed my long-term outcome and the way that I view them.
I think I'm the same way, man. I think that's exactly how I view it as well, where I think Dustin May is a guy that right now I'm open to a qualifying offer. I would be open to, hey, would you do a 3-year deal with us? Would you do a 3-year, $60 million kind of a contract? Because I don't think that's going to go too poorly for the Cardinals. And I also would say, like, they've got money to blow right now. They're not in a spot where they're having to penny pinch. And if he decided he would be interested in something like that, I think he's a pretty good guy to have around for the next few seasons. He's still in his late 20s. It's not like he's 35 years old, you know? And this is why I loved the signing when it happened. There's upside to this. Either he becomes a trade asset for you at the deadline, he could potentially become part of your core for at least the next few seasons, or worst case scenario, like it blows up in your face, he gets hurt, and whatever, you're out $12 million. That's the going rate for any of these guys nowadays anyways, and most pitchers end up blowing up in your face if you decide to sign them in free agency. I mean, look at what's happening right now with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They went out and made a huge investment into Burns, and he can't get on the field for them. So that's kind of the way I view. I think he's the guy most likely to be around a little bit longer term. I would also say this. I'm interested in what Kyle Leahy has become. I'm not all the way there. Like, I don't know how much I'm believing it, but when I watch him through about 5 innings, like, okay, I kind of get what the Cardinals are selling me on him. I was highly skeptical early in the season. I just didn't see it. But now I watch him like, okay, yeah, I understand. I get where they're selling me the upside of him as a 5 and dive type of a starter. And having that guy cost controlled, cheap, back end of the rotation, yeah, I get how that could work out for the next few seasons at least, and how you like having that guy as a part of the rotation, even if not somebody that's leading it by any stretch.
Yeah, I just think with Leahy, yes, he's been better and looks good at times when he's going 5 and dive. Is he a guy I'm going to go through the arbitration process with completely? You know, like that. Again, once he starts to make real money is when I start to probably go, okay, did we have our pipeline ready to go to potentially replace him?
Yeah.
And especially because he's more on the older side, right? Like he's going to hit ARB eligibility in 2028. He's going to be ARB eligible year 1 at the age of 31 years old.
It's crazy.
And that's why it sucks to be starting your career as a reliever, because he got off to kind of the late start before he got to the big leagues. I don't know how he pitches his way into the plans moving forward, unless it like he really develops the stuff and like moves himself into being like a top 3 arm in a rotation. Those 4 and 5s that we're talking about, which is what I think a lot of these guys profile as, and that's fine because you're right, you can make a really good big league career out of it. But if you're having to pay those guys, then you're in the spot that they were in prior to Chaim Bloom coming in and blowing this up, which is, hey, our pipeline's really dried up and we haven't been able to develop and get cost control pitching to come in and supplement the top 3 of the rotation.
I've got one more guy that's changed my opinion a bit, but it's not on him as a regular season starter. Matthew Liberatore has opened my eyes to his ceiling as a playoff starter. The fact that he has this kind of swing and miss right now, and the curveball actually looks like the curveball that we were sold when he was a prospect, that's really interesting to me. And once you get into the postseason, there are certain guys that can play up with those shorter bursts. Now, I think Libby is exactly what we thought he was as a regular season starter, where I still think you're talking about kind of like a mid-4s, maybe low-4s ERA over the course of a season, and maybe he's not quite the innings eater that some expected him to be, but the effectiveness in a short burst, where for a month, can he be a guy that gets a bunch of swing and miss, gives you 4 to 5 innings, and those like 2 times through the order, he's just really, really good for 3 or 4 consecutive starts, which is basically what you need to get through a postseason? I'm starting to believe he has that in him, where this time last year, I very much did not. I was not open to that idea. So that's another guy that I would say has intrigued me, but for different reasons than these others. I think he's going to be a part of your rotation. Like, that part has never really been in question. It's just about what the upside is. And I now think you could go into a playoff series and Matthew Liberatore's your, like in the DS, your 3rd starter that gets a chance. And I think that's okay. I think you can win with that guy as your 3rd starter. The way that like we saw this with Brandon Pfaadt. I think he could have that for a postseason. Or last year, who was the guy? Trey Yasevich for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think he could do that for a postseason. That doesn't mean he's a great starter, but he's got the ability in a short burst 1-month cycle to be somebody that outperforms what they normally are expected to be.
Yeah, and like him, I said this last week when we had this conversation with Libby. I'm intrigued by it because it is interesting. I don't know how sustainable what he's doing is, because when you look at his numbers, like over his last 6 starts, 3.98 ERA, FIP is 2.66, 38 strikeouts in 31 innings. All right, I like that. And then I look at 34 hits on top of 12 walks in that span. I go, holy crap, that's a lot of traffic he's allowing on base. I don't know how sustainable that is for him, but this is why when we have these conversations about the trade deadline of, hey, what would the Cardinals do if they're in it? I want them to operate like they want to make the playoffs, because the only way for me to find out is, could Libby play up in the playoffs, is to be in the playoffs. So that his regular season, I'm with you. There's not a whole lot that I think has really changed for me. The postseason, though, because of what we're seeing with the strikeout stuff in these small bursts, is where it is a little bit more intriguing, and I'd love to see what it looks like. Now, what does that mean for him long-term for the Cardinals? I don't really know still. Like, even if you made the playoffs, we saw him pitch well in the playoffs. I don't know what that would mean, because I'm not convinced that this is suddenly the window is open. They're going to be going to the playoffs for the next 6 years. This could be, and we talked about this on the show today, this could be hey, we made the playoffs and then we're worse the next year. And we miss, and you miss for the next 3 years, and then you don't get the value of Matthew Liberatore.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I find him to be pretty interesting right now. All right, going into the weekend, we've referenced it. You're going up against the Cincinnati Reds. It continues the homestand, so they'll be playing these games at Busch Stadium. It's Leahy, Libby, and McGreevy. Those are the 3 expected starters for the Cardinals over the next few days. T-Bone, one of the biggest storylines in this series is, how will they deploy Hunter Dobbins? The belief is he will be an option on Friday. We'll see if they use him. And if not, he's very likely to piggyback on Saturday with Matthew Liberatore. So he'll get an extended run on one of those 2 games. Dobbins, for those unfamiliar, he had his debut over the weekend, was really good for the Cardinals. They keep him around. He's still going to be on his starter turn, which would be Friday or Saturday. How do you think they deploy him? What do you think this ends up looking like over the weekend? And do you think that's it? Is that the end of him being up here at the major league level, or do they keep him around for a little while?
I'll start with that back question here, because it's one I feel most confident in my answer in. I don't think this is just going to be, he's going to make a relief appearance and then go down. I think they're getting ready to transition back to a 6-man rotation for a turn. And the reason I say that is they've got this 3-game set with the Reds, and then they're off. And then they go 3 at New York, 3 at Minnesota, 3 against San Diego, and 2 at Kansas City before their next off day. So you're looking at 11 games in 11 days there. I bet they sneak him into a rotation start there. So, because I originally thought they called him up for bulk innings, we're going to send him down, and we're going to go back to Mott's in this area for a 6-man. They decided to keep Dobbins around, so that's what I think the role is moving forward. How they deploy him this weekend, I'm not really sure. I think it's going to be somewhat what it looked like with Matthew Liberatore. Whether it's Libby or Leahy, one of those 2 go 5 innings Friday or Saturday, Dobbins gets the rest. And then you hope that maybe the offense opened it up a little bit and you feel a little bit more confident, because they were up, 5-1 or 5-0 in that game against the Cubs. Mm-hmm. I think that's what they're going to look for is, okay, hopefully the offense gives us a decent lead. We'll go 5 and dive with one of these starters, and then he'll close it out for us. And then we've got the bullpen ready, our big arms available for us for the next 2 games in the series against the Cincinnati Reds. I think that's what their plan is going to be this weekend.
I'm not so sure. I think that's the plan for the weekend. The longer term with him, I think that could be a Bryson Mott start. I think a lot of it depends on how effective he is over the weekend.
Fair. I'm not convinced they've moved Mott's into the 6th spot in their depth chart. And the reason I say that is, if you go back and look at why they were going to start Mott's, it wasn't, we want Mott's over Dobbins. It was, oh, bleep, rain came and Dobbins just started 2 days ago.
No doubt. It was timing as much as anything, but it told me that they're at least comfortable with Bryson Mott. And now that he is a 40-man option for them, I could see a scenario where if he's not great in his appearance over the weekend, he had dealt with a lot of traffic, kind of similar to what we were talking about with Libby in his recent starts down at AAA. Maybe they say, you know what? All right, you didn't get the job done. You did once and you were able to stick around for a week. You didn't then get the job done. And next Tuesday, I believe it is, Matt Swanson is eligible to come back up to the major league level. He can be recalled at that point. Then you will basically be able to have a full bullpen for you over the next few days in New York. And then you make a decision whenever you're ready to go ahead and bring up Bryson Mott at some point in that stretch where you've got 10 consecutive games. So I could see that scenario as well. I think his future, my guess is his future as that spot starter will be determined by if he's able to be successful over the weekend against Cincy.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now to see if Minnesota, because I'm assuming that's where that spot start is coming.
Probably, yeah.
Minnesota is 16th in WRC plus against left-handed pitching this year, 20th in WRC plus.
So it's a better matchup for the righty.
So it's a little bit better of a matchup for the righty. I'm assuming that's why it's going to be Dobbins sticks around. And then you don't have to avoid the roster move potentially that you're going to have to go with there. And then once he makes that spot start, I agree with you then. Then I think they send him down, and it's probably Swanson is the one that ends up getting called back up once those 15 days are up. But I think that's the way they're going to play this. I think if you would have seen Minnesota was worse against lefties by like a significant margin, I think maybe they would have done what you're talking about. But I also think they would have made that move already. I think they would have sent getting all these names juggled together. I think they would have sent Dobbins down right after he got that bulk outing against Chicago and would have probably recalled Roycroft and then said, all right, we're going back to Motts for this 6-man, and then we're going back to Swanson when we need to. Now, the reason they didn't do all that is because of all the options you're using.
You're going to throw in?
No. Luckily, I was able to keep all of those straight for that whole 4 sequence. I hope everybody followed that.
Nobody did, but that's okay. We're moving right along here on the Redbird Report. Matt Swanson, by the way, has been very good since going back down to AAA. 4 appearances, 5 2/3 innings, 8 strikeouts for him, and maybe most notably, has only 1 walk. So the command, it appears, is a little bit better. Now it's AAA. It's a little different than doing it at the big league level, but it seems like maybe he's regained a bit of his form, which would be a really nice boost for the Cardinals. He was so good for them a year ago. I know T-Bone had some high hopes for him. He has a weird profile, doesn't induce a whole lot of chase, or does get a lot of chase, not a lot of swing and miss. I don't know, but hopefully he's able to get back to the guy that he was last year. All right, T-Bone, by the time we talk again next, the Cardinals will have a 3-game series against the Cincinnati Reds. They will be in the midst of a series against the awful, no good, very bad New York Mets. How you feeling about the Cardinals heading into the stretch?
I feel pretty good. You know, now that you're getting reinforcement back in Nootbaar, which we talked about a lot in the beginning of this episode, I think you should go 4-2 in this stretch. And I'll say this, I'm really circling this Red series. I think this is where we see the first team fall out of the NL Central. I think you should kill off the Cincinnati Reds here. And the reason I say that is you're going up against Singer Lodolo, who have not been very good this season. You should hopefully take advantage of that. It's probably a bad sign they don't have a starter name for the Game 3 yet. But the reason I bring this up is this might be the opportunity where we see the Reds fall out of this. They're down Ellie De La Cruz. He's on the IL. You get them at home. And then if you can take 2 or 3 from them here, this is their schedule moving forward. At the San Diego Padres, home for 3 against Arizona. Then they get a little bit of a break with the Mets at home. And then at the Yankees versus the Brewers, at Pittsburgh, at Milwaukee. If they're without Ellie for that whole stretch, that's about the next month. And if he's got a hamstring issue, I'm betting he's out that entire month. They don't have the offense to survive through that, and their pitching's not been good enough. So I think this could be the beginning of the end for the Cincinnati Reds. And then you've got the Mets. The Mets stink, right? You should take care of them. They are an awful baseball team. They have not been able to piece it together. You should go into New York and take 2 or 3 from that club.
They basically have 3 guys that can beat you. That's it. And that's with Elliot De La Cruz out right now. It's Stewart, Steer, and JJ Bleday has been pretty good lately. So that's kind of it. Everybody else in their lineup, oof. You think the Cardinals have a lack of depth. Wait until you see what the Reds are bringing to town this weekend. And then you look at what they've got on the mound, you're going to see some of their lesser arms. Lodolo has been quite bad so far this season. Brady Singer has somehow been even worse so far this season. The Cardinals are catching them at the right time. We've said this before. That's not a criticism. That's not like, hey, you don't deserve the credit for winning. No, you play whoever is on the other side of things. This is why depth is so important in Major League Baseball, because if you don't have it, you run into these spots that the Reds are in right now, and the Cardinals need to take advantage. You should win 2 out of 3, if not sweep them this weekend. And then, as you mentioned, that series in New York, you should win 3 out of 4 in that series. You should be able to take advantage of this stretch of your schedule, and then you should be able to take advantage of the Minnesota Twins, because that's not a very good baseball team either. So you look at those 3, this is a spot where the Cardinals need to take advantage of what's on their schedule. I didn't even mention you got San Diego and then Kansas City. This next 15 days, 20 days. Huge part of the Cardinals schedule. They need to create some distance between themselves and the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds. I think the Cubs are still going to be in there, but maybe not. We'll see. It's possible we could get to the end of the month of June, and the Cardinals, whenever they play against the Cubs on 4th of July, that might be the series that we ultimately determine, all right, it's 2 teams still at the top. If the Cardinals are able to take advantage and do what they should do against these teams that are coming up on their schedule. We'll be following along. We'll be reporting once again next Thursday here on the Redbird Report. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We always do this each and every week here on the 101 ESPN YouTube page. You can also check us out on the app. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL is where you find us. And that is where the video side of things are. That is what Zane does a fantastic job for us, always helping us out on the production side of things. For Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys next week here on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.